Thank you for joining us today for another exclusive interview sponsored by Immovet. Help your horses reach their maximum potential with Immovet's lines of natural homeopathic products. I'm your host today, Aurelian Drumion. Today we are joined by Matthew Smith, a trainer whose journey from Ballydoyle to Bart's Coming Stable has shaped a unique and worldly approach to racing. With Group 1 performers like Fierce Impact and Hurtle Myrtle already on his resume, Smith now turns his focus to Headwall, a quirky but brilliant sprinter being primed for the Everest, of course. We'll discuss the patient's development of this rising star, what it takes to prepare for a $20 million race, and how Smith's family legacy and international experience continue to influence his training philosophy. Get ready for an in-depth conversation with one of Australia's most respected horsemen. Well, Matthew, great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. So your journey took you from Aidan O'Brien, Ballydoyle to working with Bart Cummings. How did those contrasting experiences, shape your training philosophy and approach to developing horses like Headwall?
Yeah, look, two very different trainers, but I think if you can compare the two, which is always difficult to do, but both very methodical trainers in terms of their approach to their horses, both very patient trainers, and I think really being patient is a part of training that you have to have as a trainer. You can't sort of force the horses to be ready until they're ready, and they mature at different stages and they grow and develop. And I think that's the big thing with horses. If you watch them developing and coming along, you've got to really be careful not to push them too hard early, because it will shorten their career if they get injuries. It can have a fairly significant impact on their career in time. And obviously, the thoroughbred continues to grow till they're 4 or 5. So that's a huge part of assessing, when to push and when to stop with your horses, is just making sure that you're patient and really they're ready to run when you get them, when you start to train them hard and get them ready. They've got to be sound and their bones have got to be set. So I think both trainers were very mindful of not pushing young horses, but obviously there's opportunities where you can on the more mature ones that are born early and develop quicker. So you've got to obviously push those horses, but the others, be very mindful to be patient with them.
Excellent. You waited 8 years between your first Group 1 win with Hurtle Myrtle and your next with Fierce Impact. How did that period of perseverance prepare you mentally for the challenges, of training at the highest level?
Look, Hurdle Myrtle came along very quickly. We trained her to win a Group 1. I wasn't training very long, a few years maybe, when we got that Group 1 win, and she came quickly. And then after that, we had some nice horses, a lot of nice horses through the stable, but it just shows how hard it is to win at that elite level. And you've got to get the opportunity to get the horses. That's the most important part. And I think along that journey, we wouldn't have had many Group 1 runners even during that 8-year period, just not having the right horses at the right time, and not having that elite level horses. But we were lucky enough to just that journey, I think, prepares you. I think the training of those horses all the way through prepares you to get a better horse. And once you get a good horse, how to handle that horse. So I think every horse is a journey, actually, and how you prepare that horse. They're all prepared differently to some degree. I mean, we have systems in place, but once we start to race the horses, their programs change quite a lot. So dependent upon, the soundness of the horse, whether they need a lot of work or less work, but that changes. And I think that journey between the two horses, between the Group 1s, definitely you're learning all the time, and you're always striving to get the best result out of every horse. And I think it stands you in good stead. Probably, to some degree, you're better off getting some of those better horses when you've been training a few years and you've got some more experience under your belt, as how to handle them, how to place them, and Group 1s is a very good horse.
Excellent. So you've worked in Ireland and Kentucky. What aspects of international training methods have you brought, to Australian racing, especially in preparing sprinters for races like the Everest?
That's a good question. I think, the significant differences in training in Europe, America, and Australia, and the training methods are designed around how the races are run. And so, you know, in America, it's really speed orientated, and the horses are trained that way, which it can be, and it is a lot harder on the horses. Those horses that are trained that way, and in Europe, they're uphill gallops. They're building races. They're not quick off the mark, but they continue to build to the line, and those horses are trained that way. In Australia, probably somewhere in between. You know, we have tracks that are tighter turning. Not all of them, but a lot of the tighter turning tracks, and you have to train a horse to be able to travel with speed. And then you get to the bigger tracks where you can allow your horse to be a little bit more patiently ridden. I think that the training methods definitely are definitely designed around how the horses are raced. And I think, like I do, and I've seen some big changes, especially in America when I was out there at that time. You know, the training facilities, the sand tracks are quite tough on the horses, and I think there was a fair bit of veterinary intervention went on to keep the horses as sound as they could. I think things have changed a lot there for the benefit of the horse, especially they've stopped a lot of the treating of the horses, and they looked at other methods to keep them sound. And I think that's been a big win for the horse, especially not to be trainers to be so reliant on drugs and more reliant on techniques of how to keep them sound and get them to the races fit and well. And I think we've seen in Australia too in the last 10 years a massive change in that too. In Australia, I think our laws, veterinary, are fantastic, and it benefits the horse. And, you know, as a trainer, you've got to always be looking at a different way, a different approach to train a horse to keep them sound and get them to the races as best you can.
For sure. For sure. I think it's very important to have your horse healthy mentally as well, definitely.
For sure. Yeah, I think you know, the addition of some of the like the facilities we have in Australia now, where we can freshen the horses and keep them in work and get them out in the paddock. You know, we've got a farm that we use, Luscombe Park, and we get them in the paddock for a week between runs, and they just freshen up mentally, and they come back and they really are a different horse. And I think that's one of the things that's changed, and the intensity of the preparations have changed a lot, I think, in the last 10 years in terms of racing horses over frequently, probably every couple of weeks, and eventually they get tired. Whereas now we're starting to lengthen those preparations, give them 3 weeks, a month between runs, but keep them ticking over, keep them mentally happy, and you can sustain a much longer preparation.
Let's talk a little bit about Headwall. So you have described him as having, 2 gears, stop and go. Can you walk us through your process of working, with quirky horses and how you have developed these racing manners over time?
For sure. Look, it's so many. I mean, thoroughbreds are very finely bred, and a lot of them are quite highly strung. And so a big part of training race horses is actually getting into the heads of the horses and getting them happy. And once a horse becomes happy in his environment with his work rider and the people around him, they do change considerably from a mental aspect. They do relax, and they start to get confident around the people they're with, and they really can turn the corner big time. And like Headwall, we've had him all the way through since a yearling, and he's always been a horse that, as I've said before, he used to just have 2 gears, stop and go, but he's now starting to relax a bit better, and he's now starting to look like a horse, or he has done this preparation. He's run a strong 1,200 metres, which is something we felt he could do, but he wouldn't allow himself to do it just purely because he wanted to really travel and overdo it in his races. And so it's taken a lot of work to teach him to relax, to teach him to follow a horse, even in a track work, slow work in the mornings. Just getting him to sit behind another horse was a method we used, just to get him to relax and just drop the bridle and not be too worried about what's going on around him. So he's taken a long time to get it, but this preparation's been a breakthrough prep for him. He really took that next step in terms of relaxing in his races, and he was very good at the back end of his races. So, but a lot of horses are that way, and I think that's why you see, some horses improve a lot when they move. If they're trained out of a paddock, or they're taken to a different environment where it's a little bit less stressful for them, you'll find that they will relax. And I think it's a huge part of training racehorses, just getting them right mentally. I think if you can get that right, you're halfway there, really.
Do you have any specific training adjustments, in the making, I guess, for the Everest campaign? And how does that might differ from other, Group 1?
I think one method we've used recently in the last couple of years since we've been using Luscombe Park is we've put a deep sand track in there. And so that track, it's designed pretty much modelled off what they would work in the beach. So it's quite deep, and it allows the horses to work in the sand, get their heart rate up. They build up their top line, but there's no concussion on their legs, but it's all cardio. So high heart rate, no speed, but just allow the horses to breathe in that heavy sand. And we found a big improvement in a lot of the horses, because you can't get that same amount of work into them quite often on the training tracks, because the sands are just a lot shallower. And so the horses might be going quicker, but they're actually not getting much out of it, whereas you can go slower in the deep sand. And we've used this successfully with particularly with Headwall, and he's a horse that's really adapted to it. He enjoys it, and he was a horse that had a few little soundness issues as a young horse, and we had to really be careful with him. And he's just come through that now. And he's 100% sound, and he's good. And I just find that very helpful for a lot of horses that have knee and joint issues. There's just way less concussion on them in the deep sand, and they stay sounder for longer.
It's amazing. Headwall was, fairly unlucky not to win a race during the autumn. How do you maintain confidence in a horse ability when, the results obviously don't really reflect their true talent?
Yeah, look, I think with Headwall, I don't think. There's a lot of other horses that would be more in that would fit that more perfectly. But he last preparation, he hasn't been beaten far in each of those Group 1s, and like confidence in the horse. I guess you see the confidence in the track work with the horse, and you can see how they're building in themselves, and the feedback from your track work rider as to how that horse has come through the run, and if it's affected him mentally or physically. And I think through last preparation, each race that he had, he actually grew in confidence. I think he got better and better. His run in the TJ was better, probably in the run before in Melbourne, and the run before that, and right through to where we went to Perth. And look, he was a tad unlucky there to get caught on the line. But look, it's a good question. I mean, horses do lose confidence in a preparation. When you see them lose that confidence, and you can, even when you're looking at the horses in the morning and the afternoons, you can see a change in their manner and their demeanour, and you can see, hey, this horse is not quite right. There's something not right with this horse, and then when you go back to the races with them, if they don't perform, you've seen that during the week, and you say to yourself, well, okay, I've learned something there about that horse, and that race did knock him around, and he's not himself. But I think confidence is a huge thing for horses. I mean, you've got to if you get the start of the prep right, you're okay. I mean, the first couple of runs, I think, in a preparation is so important for the confidence of the horse, for the fitness. And if you get that right, I think the preparation generally looks after itself.
I'd like to talk to you a bit more about, I guess, your family. With your father, Christopher, being involved in racing at Wangaratta, and your children showing equestrian talent. What does passing on your passion for horses mean to you personally, and I guess professionally as well?
Yeah, look, my father was heavily involved in the Wangaratta Turf Club, and for a number of years, and I think it definitely left an impression on me going to the races with him, and he would quite often be speaking after the races and giving the trophies to the trainers and the jockeys, etc. And it left an impact on me. And I think I didn't think about it much to start off with, but when I look back now, I do think, heading to the races with mum and dad on a Saturday, and back in those days, that was one of the things we did every Saturday. We went to the races and travelled around Victoria, and we had runners. Quite often, Dad would have a few runners here and there, and it was great. And it definitely something during that period made me sort of go towards racing. Look, I think my wife Melissa, she was champion girl rider at the Sydney show, and her parents bred racehorses and raced horses. So, I think between the two of us, it's in our blood. And my daughter Claudia, she's really keen, and she's got some eventers, and she's riding events and dressage, and she loves it. She's competing at the interschools this week in Sydney. So, look, you never know what your kids are going to do. I mean, we don't push it down their throat, but Sebastian's not quite as enthusiastic as Claudia, but he can ride and he rides well, but he's just not quite as interested. But Claudia loves it. And I think Claudia will end up doing something in the equestrian field. I'm not sure what, but she really loves it.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Who bred Headwall, and how did you first become aware of him, outside the traditional sale ring system?
Yeah, so we quite a few years ago, I was given an opportunity to train for the syndicate at Reg and Marie Young, John and Anne Adam, Burge and Nina Sacrosan, and Jim Marsden. The syndicate have bred and raced horses for many, many years, and we were lucky enough to meet with them at one stage, and we were offered some horses to train. And they bred this horse, and they bred a number of horses that we've trained, and we were lucky enough to come across him. And you never know where a good horse is going to come from. That's for sure. I mean, he always showed like he was going to be a pretty nice horse, but you never know that they're going to climb to what he's done so far. And I think there's definitely a lot of good wins left in this horse. He's a serious horse, and he can definitely compete in Everest. But the syndicate, managed by Reg and Marie, and Reg, they breed 2 or 3 mares every year, and those horses will come through the stable. And we've had a few slow ones, we've had a few fast ones, but thank goodness Headwall's come along, because he's a
Fair enough. Can you discuss the private acquisition, maybe the process, for Headwall specifically, and what attracted you to him when he wasn't offered at auction?
Look, he came through our system as a young horse, as a yearling, and he was broken in, and he came straight into us then, and we started working on his manners, and he was always a very highly strung horse. But he was bred and retained by the owners. They didn't decide to offer him at auction. They do offer some horses, but for whatever reason, he didn't go. He's by Dream Ahead, probably not the most popular stallion, I guess. He was out of a mare that I trained. She was only a small mare. She was fast, but she only won a couple of races. So you never know how genetics are going to work. But he came through as a young horse. He was retained, and he always showed promise right from the word go. It took a little while for us to really work him out, and for him to start to really be confident about what he was doing. But look, we're lucky. The syndicate were incredibly patient. We had to give him, I think, 6 or 8 months off at one stage. He had an injury to his hind leg, and so he had a very extended spell there at one stage. And just lucky, we've got the right people that own him and that have been patient enough to stick with him. And I think when horses show that above average ability, you've always just got to do whatever you can to keep those horses sound and keep them in the best condition you can. I mean, the elite horses are a little bit of a different model to the regular horse, and they tend to try that bit harder, and they tend to put a lot more pressure on their legs, and they are prone to injuries and things. So just got to be very careful with the management of the horses. But look, we're just very lucky that the syndicate retained him, and that's how he ended up with us.
Excellent. It's definitely very important to be patient in any case. I mean, you can't really do anything when a horse needs, to rehabilitate.
That's right. I mean, you can't make them get to the races quicker than they can in terms of their development, and it's a patience game, racing. And I mean, my old boss Bart Cummings said the cheapest thing in racing is patience, and he's right. Like, if you just got to, you can't go into a racehorse and just expect it'll win the races as a 2-year-old. I mean, I think most horses don't race at 2. The majority of racehorses will race at 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. They're not going to be out there racing as 2-year-olds. So it's a bit of a long-term investment. And you just need people that are prepared to be patient and enjoy the horse and enjoy it for what it is. I mean, they're a beautiful animal, and we every day that we get up in the morning and we go out there and look at the horses, we love it. It's a great day for us, and we feel privileged to be working and training the racehorses. So something we love very much, but we really like to look after them best we can, and patience is a huge part of that.
Finally, on to the last question, Matthew. If Headwall secures an Everest slot, what would that achievement represent for you after decades in that industry, and how would it compare to your previous Group 1 successes?
Look, the Everest is obviously a race that's developed recently, and it's become bigger races there is in Sydney, and you've got the Everest and the Golden Slipper and the Golden Eagle, but the race is up there in the top couple of races, and it's a race that we really want to be in. And we've had a runner. We had Buenos Notches in there a few years ago. It was a very good horse, and it was a great experience to go through. And I think now, having been through that journey, I think I'm better prepared the next time for it, which is this year, hopefully with Headwall. And I feel way more confident about our preparation and everything we've done leading into this race has been absolutely spot on. Not that I wasn't confident previously, but having been through that process now, you can sort of see the where you want to go on the journey and how you want to take the horse to that race. I believe he's the right horse. I think that's a big part of it, having a horse that actually can compete in the race. He's definitely the right horse for the race. And so it's just about timing now and getting a Guernsey. So hopefully someone will pick him up and we can take that journey again. But I mean, everybody in the stable as well, just not myself, it's the staff and everybody that gets up in the morning, the riders, the people that look after the horses. I mean, it's a great thrill for everybody involved in our stable to get a runner in one of those big races. So hopefully this year we can get him in there, and you never know what will happen once you get in.
It's definitely very important to have a team behind and a great team, and that works together, for sure.
100%. Like, you can't do any of this without having a really good team of people around you. I mean, horses, they've got to be attended to 24/7. You've got to have people who are invested as much as we are, which we have. We've got great staff, and I can't thank them enough for the work they put in here and at the farm. And I think that gets missed, the journey for them as well. I think the people that are doing the work, the daily work, and looking at those horses every day and just being involved. I mean, the camaraderie we see within the stable, within the staff, it's something else. Just between each staff member when they get a winner or they're in a big race, and that journey for them as well. And seeing it on social media and how it's changed their lives and how they've enjoyed it. I think it's a big thrill. So. Look, it's definitely a team effort. So we can't get there without everybody being on the same page. And so, we're really looking forward to the next 6 months, especially with Headwall and a few other good horses we have.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the interview, Matthew. That was great.
Anytime. No, thanks for having me.
For sure.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed participating.